3000.
What is doing? My name is Maloney. This is the 3000 podcast. I'm joined today by Wayne Lim from the Future History Podcast. Thanks for coming, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
The Future History Podcast. I love the name. I love the branding. I love the show. So it's going to be interesting to jump in, talk about where all that came from. But before we do that, I think we need to sort of give you some, give the audience some basis about who you are and what you do professionally, man.
Yeah, so my background is as a graphic designer, brand strategist, not in many ways related to the podcast.
But it comes across that you're good at that, you know.
Yeah, man, I can prop up the smoke and mirrors. That's what I've always been good at doing. But I just found that along the way, doing design and with an art background, I just take a lot of inspiration from other creative folk, not necessarily design-based or art background. It's just whatever goes, just the essence of their creativity, and catching up with a whole bunch of folk around the way and over the years, I thought there's just a lot of there's value in that. So I thought, you know what, just put together a podcast. Didn't really give it much thought, to be honest, and just wanted to catch up with people and hear their stories, whatever wisdom they have to share, and just put it down and share it out there and create what I call this a positive creative ripple effect and push out their message.
For sure. And it's awesome that people from all sorts of different creative fields can learn from each other. It might have nothing to do with what their field's about, but there is a lot of crossover and you can learn a lot from people's mistakes and things that they've done right.
Yeah, dude, it's not even really about the discipline. And like, if you want to just pare it right back, it's just a whole bunch of shit that you learn in life anyway, right? Like, you know, we were just talking before this. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to learn from the mistakes. You're going to grow from those mistakes. And just the nature of creativity, that you're challenging yourself to do something that just has never been done before. And I think that, like, the people that I speak with, that they have that innate in them, and they will, you know, they step up to that challenge. They get so much joy and fulfillment from doing that. And I think it's part that the fear of stepping into the unknown, but also that excitement of creating something that the world's never seen before, and, you know, an opportunity for them to express themselves and to be constantly living in that space.
For sure. And there's no shortage of creative people in Melbourne or Australia, man, so you're always going to have plenty of guests.
Yeah. Originally, I was I had a few international guests as well. We were recording, doing the video calls, and I stopped doing that because it was just like you're saying. There's no shortage of guests, and man, the more you speak with people, you kind of see how everything just links up. And the people that I'm speaking with now, around the way, we would find that there's about maybe 5 other people from different parts of our lives where we've intersected, and some that we may have even crossed paths around the way without even realising it. So it's just the community, the more people that you meet and the bigger your community gets, the smaller and tighter you realise it actually is.
Especially from a creative standpoint, that people cross over a lot with that sort of thing. Yeah. And that's because creative people seek out and find other creative people. And whether or not you like to admit it, it's all part of networking, you know. And it accidentally happens. It's good, but people actually do network sometimes.
Yeah, man. Like, you call it networking, you call it just like building connections with people. I think, like, that's the thing for me, is that, like, I get a lot out of just catching up with these people and having these conversations and just being amongst it all. And it just helps, you know, you just take away something from that person, you know, and then you just put that in your bank of inspiration. And then when you put it back out there, it will attract someone else who's on that same wavelength. And then before you realize it, that you've got this group of people that are kind of like ebbing and flowing at the same time, that are going through the same sort of challenges. And like I said, man, you call it creativity, but like it's just life.
And that's one thing I've found doing this, man, which is similar to yours but different as well, is I've met heaps of new friends and like just built a network of people that I could call and ask questions and help, ask for help, and they'll ask me for help, and it's awesome, man. That's what it's all about.
No, dude, that's exactly it. And like, you know, we are just creating something that's different for them as well. You know, they are creative people. Like the guests that you have, you know, all different artists, musicians, graphers, that they are doing their thing, and you know that they want to be able to reach an audience as well, but they're just so stuck and confined in doing their thing that when you create a platform for them to be able to then share their content and to reach another audience, they're gonna be all over it. You know?
Most people are, but the challenge is, as you probably well know, is that not everyone wants to talk about themselves, and not everyone's comfortable in front of a camera. And people say to me all the time, "Oh, I hate the sound of my own voice." I'm like, I hate the sound of my own voice too. I got to listen to it all the time.
Yeah.
But that's it. Not everyone's down for it, and that's cool because it's not for everybody.
No, yeah, that's a good point. It's not, and yeah, you get a lot of ghosting. A lot of people are just like flat out. Well, I mean, look, you extend the invitation. There's something there that you could learn from. There's something there that you think that they can share. But if they're not down for it, then they're not down for it.
Yeah. I think you'll find that as you build up the episodes and keep going, that some of those people that didn't write back might write back. That's been my experience.
Yeah, maybe.
As you stack them up, people start to notice more, you know?
Yeah. And I don't know, like, was it been for you when you have people reaching out to you, but then now you're in the position where you got to start to curate your guest list even?
Yeah, it's hard, man. And it's like, yeah, I think some people think that they're more interesting potentially to people that don't know them than maybe they are.
Yeah.
So I've built a Google form where people can, if they ask to be on the show, I say go and fill out the form. And there is certain criteria there. And some people might be interesting to their friends, but I think if no one is aware of who they are, then their story, everyone's got a bit of a story, but unless people know who they are, I think most of these people's stories are probably not going to resonate with a greater audience.
Yeah.
It might work if you've got a really big platform. Like, I'm sure Lex Friedman could have any person off the street on and people are going to pay attention because it's a huge show. But when you have a small platform, is it going to... you know what I mean?
There's got to be some overlap at, in this stage of the game.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. Like, I get a lot out of talking to anybody. I reckon that you just pick any random off the street, they'll have a story. Whether or not they'll have any lessons to go with it, but they'll have stories.
Well, that's it, man. And I think sometimes the lesson is just don't do what I did, or do it differently. You know.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your personal journey of like getting into designing and creative stuff. Like, did you study that? Like, I know with graphic design you don't have to study. Some people just fake it till they make it straight through.
I did. But I agree, you don't have to.
No.
I think there's a lot that you learn just from doing it rather than studying. I went to uni for it, and I don't want to say that I regret it, but it didn't really help me much.
Yep.
I think so. Just going back, like my art was my background.
Yep.
I just liked to create things, and it was just more of a visual thing. I just found that I could communicate really well visually. Like, I just understood what shapes and colours, how I could just get across or communicate with those at my disposal. Chickened out with art, to be honest, man. Like, I had a poor relationship with art. I would always use it as a way of, I guess, just like alleviating my angst. Okay. So I would feel, just like a, usual teenage sort of bullshit. And I would go towards art to get that as my therapy. And so it was sort of just a way of me getting into the art, but also then it would just perpetuate that angst. So kind of just moved away from there. And
what kind of art are we talking about?
Just visual, just painting, illustration.
Fine art, illustration, that's
Yeah. Yeah, so, early on did a couple of group shows, that kind of thing, and some interesting collaborations. So it was all fun, but then just moved towards design, because I think what I found with design is that I just had more control over what I could do. Mm-hmm. You could just be really meticulous with the details, and that way you could just make sure that I could be very clear with the communication. And then from there, just gradually moved into developing brands and then brand strategy. I think it was just more of you know, I've always had an interest in human psychology and just the way that we interact with each other, the way that we interact with things and just get through life. I've always, you know, just been curious as to how all that went about. So that was how branding kind of played into that. And so, you know, meandered through a career working freelance and some full-time gigs. And the last one was as the creative director at Basketball Australia, which was a huge learning experience. And since then, it's just decided that, you know, like from everything that I took away from that experience up until now, it's like I can't be working for anyone anymore. I'm just going to be doing my own thing.
For someone who loves basketball, that must have been like an interesting job, but also fun, or is it too close to what you're actually into?
No, it was, I don't know if fun would be the right word. There was definitely some fun moments, but it was high pressure.
Yep.
And it was like, the thing is that here's one thing that I think that a lot of people should really learn from is that I went into that job with no sports background at all.
Did you like basketball?
Loved it.
Okay.
Loved it.
So that helps.
Yeah, and that was the thing, right? Like that's how I got into the job, because all the work that I had done up until that point was mostly in commercial and retail, and they wanted to bring that expertise into developing the brand for Basketball Australia. And it was because a lot of my work that I did outside of the paid work, all my passion projects were revolved around basketball. Cool. So they wanted to see how I could then, you know, just bring in the expertise that I already had and mix that with the passion. So, you know, it was a lot to learn in that role. It was it's definitely some fun moments, and, you know, you get to see how you can bring in your passion and to then like build this community.
You also, it was a good, I'm guessing it's a pretty good time, a strong time to be involved with basketball. You've got a good product. At a national level, it's strong, and the the national team is strong. So you've got a good product to push. It's not like you're pushing basketball back in the 80s when it was a bit of a struggle.
No, that's the thing, man. Like basketball sells itself, right?
Yeah.
So then it was just a matter of then like recognizing what makes basketball so good, and a big part of it is how basketball's like influenced creativity and culture in so many different ways, all the different facets. So, you know, you got your music, fashion, visual arts, all of it. So it's influenced all those areas. So then it was just a matter of then bringing them back in and bringing those influences back into the fold, and then creating a brand that represented how it has permeated into culture, how it's such it's iconically a culture in and of itself.
Yep.
So then it was just, you know, from there, just went off and found that, you know, like I wanted just to create something my own and just to, you know, be my own boss once again. And the podcast came about because I just enjoyed conversations with people, man. And I didn't even, honestly, like I was thinking about this on the way here, like what was the catalyst of the podcast? Like what was the thing that kind of set it off? And it was more like I just wanted to just chat.
Yeah,
and that was it.
Yeah, that's it, man. Pretty much the same as me. I'm like, what can I do as I get older that it gives me an excuse to talk to people? And that's sort of what it is.
Yeah. And then just give it some sort of purpose. Like what's like, if you want to have conversations, like who's going to want to listen? Like what's the point? Like honestly, like what is the point? What was the purpose of the conversation? And I thought, well, you know, I get a lot out of speaking with creatives. So then let's just have it creative focused. Learn something from this. Learn from the people that did the things that I wish I did as well. Like I wish that I kind of went out on my own earlier on and just sucked up the challenges and just said, this is how it is.
The grass is always greener, you know what I mean? So you might not have had other opportunities, you know?
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but yeah, I still feel as though that there was a lot of chickening out early on.
Yep.
And just not really having any kind of direction. And that's kind of why I want to speak with the people that have that direction. And if not the direction, then at least have the belief in themselves that they can just weather the storm of being a creative.
And I spoke to a dude a few days ago, and he's 22 and he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's got his like life plan and goals broken down to the days. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like I fumble my way through life, to someone who's 22 that knows exactly what they want to do, it's like fucking awesome.
Maybe. Look, it is awesome, but you got to take that with a grain of salt as well. Like I speak with some of the guests, and I describe it as like it's a carrot, right? So you have this carrot that's dangling in front of you, and so he thinks that he has this particular, and it might work out exactly as he's planned.
Yeah.
But there's so much about what we do that's out of our control.
For sure.
So he has this goal, and he's working towards that goal. But along the way, there are all these things that are going to be happening in your life. And at 22, man, you're just starting off. You're just a baby.
Sure.
So you get to a certain point where you got to pivot and you got to move in all these directions. And before you know it, you're over there. Yeah. Like you thought you were going there, but you're over there. So
For sure, but just to know where, just to have the direction in the first place,
Yeah.
even if you don't end up there, I find it commendable because I didn't know what I was
No
doing.
way,
And
yeah.
I just followed whatever happened.
yeah, I think that's just been the way till maybe like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, just fumbling your way through.
But that's the thing I think with the mindset I have with the podcast is I make content that I'd like to consume.
Yeah.
That's my mantra on the whole thing. And if I like it, then hopefully other people will.
Yeah.
So I think I wouldn't listen to myself, but who do I want to hear talk? And the guests are people that I would listen to. So I think if it works for me, then hopefully it resonates with other people.
And it will, man. It will. And I think that's where you just got to start. And I think like if you're going to be authentic about what it is that you're doing and being real about it, just ask yourself that. It's like, what do I want to hear? Like what is the content that would help me? And, to your point about, just like wanting to create something that's for you, like what's the stuff that I would want to hear that I wish I heard? What are the resources that I wish I had 20 years ago?
Yeah.
And create it for that, that idiot 20-year-old.
For sure. When it comes to your guests, they're all obviously in the similar vein of the creative scene, but they are very diverse. So how do you go about keeping that balance? One thing I'm not good at is being balanced. I'm usually I'll talk to all musicians for a week and then it's all artists. Like, how do you keep that balance, man?
I just don't think about it too much.
Really? Yeah, that's the key.
It's like like everyone's already sort of connected in their own way, right? So there will just be like I caught up with a DJ just last week to get him on the podcast, and he connected through a visual designer. They've worked together.
Yep.
So it just so happens that a visual designer was connected to a musician who was actually mates with Kirby as well. So everyone's just sort of connected. So then I just don't think about it. It's like, I would love to speak with you. So just shoot him a message and then you just book in a time that's available. And I try to get a bit of a spread. So, all right. So not entirely true. I do try to get a bit of a spread. So it's just a matter of then, you know what? I am missing a bit of a musician here. And it's not so much a matter of curating. It's like, I would just love to hear what a musician has to say in this particular space that I'm in, and just look for one. And there'll be one around the way.
Yeah. And what about people reaching out to you? I talked about it a little bit, but have you had that yet? Have you reached that point where people are badgering you?
Not badgering me, but there have been people that have.
It'll happen, man.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, no, there have been people that have reached out that have said that that they wanted to jump on, and they either have or will be.
Okay.
So it's not to the point where I'm like ghosting people myself. Have had to politely find a way to tell people no. So it's just trying to not be a dick about it.
Yeah.
As well.
It's hard when you're starting out because you don't have a huge platform, but also you don't want to. If someone's not fit for you now, they might be in the future. They might not be at that part of the journey where you think they've got that much to talk about, but down the track they might be.
Yeah, for sure, man. And like you said, it just comes down to like, who do I want to speak with right now? Like, if things evolve, they evolve, and they probably inevitably will. Like, things are going to change. I'm going to change my opinion on certain things. The more guests I speak with, then the more information that's coming in here, and then just more shit to think about. And like, you know what? Maybe I do need to get this particular opinion. Someone that's going to, I guess, just contrast what I think about a certain thing, or has a different approach, and just to challenge the way I do things. That'll be great.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, coming from a branding and like your background, you obviously thought about a lot with the direction and the branding and the identity of the podcast. So how did you come to where it's at now? Which it looks and sounds awesome, I think. Man.
Yeah, thanks, man. It just comes down to what is it that I want to see? What is it that I want to hear? The branding. So I started off just working for myself and then developing, I guess, like my clientele. It was then a matter of me wanting to having to create a brand that represented me, and it was done in a bit of a haste. I didn't really give too much thought to it because I didn't want to overthink it. And then from there,
But with your background, you kind of have to overthink it. Well, you didn't want to.
Because it was just more like just do what you feel right about it, right? Like I don't want to be too analytical with that process. So then it was just like, do something that you think looks good that represents you, like me specifically. Don't worry about what other people think about it. So then it's gone through a couple of iterations as things kind of evolve and things change. And when I'm like, okay, this needs to be tightened up because it needs to better represent this component. So then it was just a matter of then like going back down to like, what do I think represents me? Then that just means that I've got to be a little bit more self-critical and really like pare back and think what is at the guts of it, what's the substance of the podcast, which is a reflection of my input into it. And from there, it's like, okay, these colors I think work. This kind of design aesthetic works, and let's just try to be as consistent as we can with that.
And yeah, you want to be classic, but it's sort of classic and modern at the same time, which I know sounds like a bit of a contradiction, but it is.
Yeah, well, that's the idea, right? Because if I'm looking at like future history, it needs to have that juxtaposition.
A cohesion that makes it make sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Do you follow trends much with designs? Like obviously you have to for your work, but do you like? I'm always seeing on Instagram, this is what's trending now, and it kind of is. Like I don't know whether that stuff we need to pay attention, or it's going to happen whether you like it or not.
Yeah, pay attention to it. It's important to pay attention, but at the same time, what works with branding is trying to whittle everything down into something that's going to be uniquely you, right? Like, say, for example, your podcast, 3000 Podcasts, there's a very distinct voice, your voice, like quite literally your voice, but then the aesthetic, everything comes together and it's uniquely you. And that's kind of what you want when you're developing branding, when you're developing something that is for you. Trends are important, right? But the thing about the trends is that once everyone's doing it, then that aesthetic is just diluted and it doesn't mean anything.
Yep.
And then you've got to try to establish the cut through. So what is it about you or the thing that you're trying to do that is unique to and different to everything else? And then try to represent that visually. I guess that's
sure. Yeah, because at one point in time, all the branding happens. And I pay attention. I love design and I'll always pay attention. Once you see a certain trend, for lack of a better term, used on like a milk ad or something, you're like, okay, that's done. We're back to the start. You know, once it gets to super mainstream popular culture, you're like, that's done.
It's done. Yeah.
And that's what we saw a few years ago with that really classic looking kind of typography, and everything looked really, I don't even know the terminologies, but then you're like, okay, that's done now. We need to move on. And now it's like bright colors and gradients are back.
Yeah, like, man, it's ebb and flows, right? So when when I speak about, I guess, like with culture and with aesthetics, and then I guess with what's on trend, is that there's culture, and then that's going to be largely defined by counterculture. Counterculture just being the people that want to be at the antithesis. They don't want to conform, right? And that's what, I guess, like what design also works, right? Like, what we're seeing now is going to be the opposite to what was just the generation before that or just the trend before that. And it's going to move and cycle again because there's going to be a need to differentiate yourself and to stand out. So the only way to stand out is to do something different. And that's part of creativity, right? Like you want to challenge what is current and just do something new.
Yeah. And do you think that like fashion and music and everything, it sort of comes in 20-year cycles, or like, is it like you see it come back around?
Yeah. Yeah, oh man, fashion is something that I've been looking into a fair bit because I don't know anything about fashion. I just dropped an episode today. By the time this comes out, probably in
it was this morning.
This morning. Spoke with Saskia Fairful. She's a technology fashion tech consultant, trying to understand what the inner workings are and what's happening behind the scenes in the fashion industry and how that impacts culture. And I think that one moves quick. Fashion moves quick, but there's a lot of reasons for that. Like the commercialization, and then the way that we consume things as well. That's ramping up. But there's going to be a shifting in the way that works as well. That things will start to slow down because they just have to.
Yeah.
Right. So then all these other influences will come in. Like everything affects everything.
Yeah.
So however, the 20-year cycles, maybe 20 years, but that they will also inject their own kind of flavor into it as well. And I can't see how 70s is going to be coming back.
But it did in the 90s.
It did,
though.
yeah, it did.
So it's kind of, yeah.
So then let's say, all right, the 70s came back in the 90s for sure, because I remember seeing all those ads for like bell bottoms and then now we're seeing like the 90s influence on the fashion. The noughties was pretty rough though. That was pretty bad. I wonder how that's going to influence.
Well, the 90s was very fluoro from just a branding perspective in general, and we're seeing that fluoro now, but it's sort of paired with like that sort of 90s techno kind of. I don't know what's trending at the moment. What would you?
Oh, dude, you're asking the wrong person.
But what do you call it? You see it a lot though.
With the
I don't know, man. It's just like fluoro seems to be used a lot at the moment.
fluoro, okay. So you reckon like the rave fashion's coming back?
Yeah, I think that's coming from the 90s. I don't know, yeah. Everything goes in cycles.
But then that kind of comes with the territory. Like the rave scene, that was pretty big in the 90s.
Yeah.
But that was, like that was a whole part of a bigger culture.
For sure. Branding is a funny, like obviously people like yourself specialize in branding, but everyone is part of branding whether they like it or not.
Oh yeah.
And that's a thing that I think now with social media, everyone is their own personal brand. Whether people like to admit it or not, or whether they like to, they play into that. It's everyone is a personal brand.
100%, man. Even if you choose to not play the game, you're playing the game. That's the choice you've made by default. That's what you're putting out. You're putting out that I'm not playing the games. Like, oh, cool, that's your brand.
Yep. Yeah, your brand is you don't want to do Facebook and Instagram. Well, that's your brand.
Yeah.
That's an interesting take on it.
I mean, like it's I've got mates that are just like they just dress. They'll pare everything back, right? Like just wear just basics because I don't want to play that fashion games. Like, well, that's your style. That's your aesthetic now.
Yeah, for sure. But everyone so whether or not you bang out a logo or whether or not you've got your own project that you work on, everybody on Instagram or on Facebook or in life is working on their own personal brand, whether they like it or not.
Yeah, man.
And I think that the sooner you figure that out, it's more. If you're going to do anything creative, you need to be on top of that. Whether you're a musician, whether you're if you're a sports person, your Instagram is your personal brand.
Yeah, and I think that's where it gets a bit tricky because when you're talking about personal brands, I don't know how forgiving society and culture is with people fucking up. Like we do that, right? Like we make mistakes, we say the wrong thing, we put the wrong shit out there. But I don't know how much leniency there is with just forgiving people and just letting them grow and evolve. But I think that's something that you got to own as well.
Yeah, I think with the whole cancel culture thing, that is where the whole society is going. It's interesting now because I think we'll find people uncancelling themselves, and that's almost started to happen.
Yeah, I mean, who is actually cancelled? I don't know. Is there anyone that's actually like properly?
Chris Lilly got cancelled and he got uncancelled. Kevin Spacey definitely got cancelled and he's trying to uncancel himself.
Oh, he's got an uphill battle.
Yeah,
but if he can do it, then everyone's safe.
I think that there's going to be a time where people go, all right, like you said, everyone makes mistakes. They deserve a second chance. It depends on the people that are perpetually making those mistakes. They're not going to get uncancelled.
Yeah, and if it's like proper sinister, then you're.
Yeah, I think footy players are a great example or sports people who can sort of make a mistake and have a second chance. You look at someone like Ben Cousins who made many mistakes, and now he's like on Dancing with the Stars. So that shows you can uncancel yourself if you try hard enough.
Yeah, like it's just all
Sports
part of.
People get too much fucking leniency though.
Yeah, there's money involved in that. Like, there's a lot of deep pockets that rely on sports stars being in the limelight. But I don't have any issues with giving people opportunities to make the mistakes and then grow from that, man. I think that you got to lean into that Because as soon as you start playing the game where you're saying things or doing things just to please people, then at what point do you just stop? When do you just stop pleasing? You know, like you try to please everyone, and you're not pleasing anyone.
With that whole sort of pleasing everybody, it loses authenticity, you know?
Yeah.
Because people are just saying and doing things because they are too scared to upset the apple cart.
Yeah, and that's exactly, you know, to the point of like personal brand. I think it's just a matter of then just being authentic and just being honest with yourself and put the shit out there. If you believe it, then, and if you feel confident enough to share it, then do it. Then do it. If people will let you know how they feel about it, you can learn from that and grow from that, and then just evolve yourself.
I think even if you don't look at the branding, say like a lot of creative people might watch this and go, okay, I don't have the money for graphic design, but I'm going to try and put out my own personal brand and try and put my best foot forward. It can be as simple as just captioning your photos in a same sort of way that builds your brand as well. There's lots of little things that come into it, isn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't even be too concerned with trying to develop a proper visual aesthetic. So like with branding, there's so much more to it than the colors or the logo.
It's presence in general.
Yeah. I mean, like if you're a business, then you kind of need to have that to convey, just to have a bit more depth in what you're saying, right? Like colors and a logo. A logo is just a shape that, you know, that has some sort of connotation to it, and it's the values that you put into it that the customers or the audience will reciprocate with, right? Like if you exemplify some values and you put a logo on that relationship's formed. So now it's just an easy way to communicate that. But with a personal brand, and I'm no expert on personal brands because it's something that I'm just trying to figure out, but it's just like, be honest with yourself. That's all it is. All it is. And just do your thing, and then the people will follow.
With big brands, like it spins me out how you can have some, like I see like little TikToks or fucking Instagram stuff. It'll be like BBC have spent $1.8 million to, change the box around the B and the C. And it's like that stuff blows me away, but I guess there's whole lots of thought process that goes into stuff like that. Or is that just bullshit and they're just fumbling their way through it, pretending that they actually need to spend $1.8 million on a rebrand that doesn't even look any different to the original one?
It's definitely a bit of both.
Yeah.
Like it's way too much money. You don't need that. Not for a visual identity. And like I was saying, man, like there's just more to a brand than just what is than the visual elements, right? Like there's just, a lot of consistency in showing up. That's more than anything. That's the most important bit. Like if you are a brand, and like what you're saying, that we all are to some degree or another, call it whatever you want, right? Yeah. Like if you're going to be developing some sort of connection with people, your audience, or even with your mates or whatever, a lot of it just comes through developing the trust through consistency. So when people start to know that you're legit, then that's when that gap gets smaller and smaller, right? And that's when they start to trust you a little bit more. But if you're going to have a particular logo and you're just not following through with what you're not doing what you're saying you're going to do, then that doesn't resonate with them. It just means that you're full of shit.
Yeah. Where do you sit on AI, man? Like obviously there's positives and negative ways to use it, but fuck, I'm seeing some people bang out some of this stuff that look just like, you're like, man, you just typed into AI some sort of logo thing and you've pulled that out and it looks fucking horrible.
Yeah, fuck, where do I sit with the AI? I had a conversation with another artist who's a mate of mine, and he uses AI quite a lot. He's an industrial designer, so he uses it, I guess, just to help him with
concepts?
With concepts more than anything. It's not quite to the point where it can match what we think. There's a lot that it needs to consider, and it's getting there. But it really just depends. When you're talking about art, I don't want to say it'll never get there, but I don't think that it will really bridge what we get from art. We resonate with art because it was made by hand and we can see the imperfections behind it. And the way that AI is currently doing art, it's too polished.
Way too polished.
Yeah, and we don't feel the same way about it.
For sure. Not only is it too polished, but often there's mistakes in that polishedness. They're hiding those mistakes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there'll be a dog with 5 legs or whatever, and you're just like, yeah, it's not there.
It's not there. I mean, look, I don't want to say I'll never get there. Who knows? Who knows? But when you're talking about more design rather than art, because there's a difference, right? Like, art is something that is just it's expressive and it's there. It's meant to have the flaws. It's meant to have the mistakes. Where design is there to, it's got an objective. It has a particular purpose and a goal. And the more that it can consider in the design process, then probably the better it will be able to get the design right. So, with, like, for example, automotive, if that's the background that made mine. Actually, it was in episode 4, and we had a good conversation about it, that it's not just about having to develop something that looks good. It has to, there's the physics behind developing a car, the aerodynamics, and then it's also understanding the manufacturing line, understanding how the marketing is going to work, understanding the finances, what materials are commercially viable, what materials are going to work first,
How
and
to
functionally.
repair those things.
All
There's
the
a
things,
lot
right?
of things to take.
There's a lot of things, and it can consider those. Whereas right now we have all these different departments, and they don't necessarily speak to each other very well. But then one AI can pull the information together, and it can just bang out the design that ticks all those boxes. It's not there yet. It's not there yet, but
all it's essentially doing is scouring the internet from what comes before it and making an educated decision, I'm under the understanding.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, so, like, it's not changing anything that isn't already there. It's not inventing anything new.
It's not. But then, like, you look at creativity and what we're trying to do with some designs, right? Like, it's trying to solve a problem, and we ourselves as people, we have a bank of information, a bank of knowledge at our disposal, and then we kind of just bring it all together to answer this next question. AI can just do that faster. It can pull more information together and then come up with a solution quicker, and probably at the moment probably not quite as precise as we need it to with some things, but it'll get there.
The thing is that I'm concerned about, people are using it and just believing what it tells you.
Yeah.
When, like, there's some things that I've tried to use it in the past, it gives you stuff that's factually incorrect because people have put rumors out on the internet. So do you know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
that's a scary thing. Like, you've got to research and make sure that shit's correct, not just from an art point of view, but yeah, I've seen people using logos that they've punched out of on there, and you're just like, mate, that's making your brand look shit.
It's looking at worse.
It is. You know what I mean? Like, you can tell straight away. Too many gradients, too many little things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in terms of art and design, it's not quite there yet.
It's not quite there.
yeah.
Well, and man, I haven't delved into it, but Instagram and Facebook keep trying to tell me that, like, there's an AI search bar, and I'm like, what even is that?
Oh, that meta thing? I don't know, man. I don't know. But I think that's something that we've got to look into carefully. Only because, if you're creating content, once you start sharing the content on these platforms, I mean, you've already given up the rights to it effectively.
Yeah.
And you're contributing to that whole mess that's going on out there with AI and the bullshit. So, I think it's worthwhile looking into it. And that I say that without actually having looked into it yet, though.
For sure. And, like, now when you post on Instagram, it comes up at the bottom, click this if you've made this with AI. Like,
Oh, for real?
there's like I don't know.
Okay.
We're in a weird shift, I think, with content creation and what people are going to. But there's people on Instagram and TikTok that are putting out just AI generated shit and making money from it, and
Yeah.
that's a scary time to be alive.
Yeah, like, man, this is the thing. Like, it's going to be hard to be able to distill what is honest, factual information, and there is no more delineation between real and fake because it's just almost like one and the same. It's a bit of a gradient spectrum now, so it's going to be hard for us to be able to distinguish what is actually, So now we're kind of taking everything with a grain of salt, which is not really great for how we function as a society, as a culture, where you're already kind of going in a bit apprehensive whether or not you're going to trust this or trust that because you just don't know.
But is it a scary time for creatives when this stuff is being utilized? And do you know what I mean? Like, do you think it is a point where people in creative fields will be out of gigs because of this sort of shit?
I don't think so, man. I think that it'll be the opposite. And I think that's kind of why I felt like with my podcast, speaking with creatives, there is that level of honesty and authenticity that you just can't recreate in AI.
Mm-hmm.
It's not built to make mistakes, but we as people, that's what we appreciate. That's how we connect with people, right? Like, we know deep down that we've come from a long line of fuck ups along the way, right? That's how we got here.
Yeah.
I mean, like if we had to be adventurous enough to step into the unknown to get to where we are, not just us individually, but the people before us, our ancestors, all that, right? Like we had to be daring and bold to take risks, and some of them have just haven't worked out. But that's how we got here. So I think that with art, there is this authenticity that we connect with, and probably don't even fully understand why. But I don't think that AI is going to be able to take over that.
Yeah, it's a time. It's a time in art where I'm just like that AI stuff happened real quickly. Like you kind of saw a little bit of it, and then all of a sudden everyone can use it. And I've got mates that aren't in art at all sending me stuff like, "Oh, yeah, I made this." I'm like, "Fuck!" Like it's just a weird time to be in a creative space.
Yeah, but if anything, it might even just push our imaginations, right? Because now, like you're limited to by what you can think. But now, if you start taking away those limitations, it can help push our creativity and push our imagination.
For sure. I've got a friend who does large scale murals, and he uses it for ideas. Then he's still got to paint them on the wall.
Yeah.
But he uses them to generate ideas. Oh, I didn't think of that. This cloud could morph into this or whatever. So it is cool to utilize it as a tool, but it's not the finished product.
No. And that's like, it will help in that way. It'll help push the imagination a little bit further. And like, I mean, I've used it for a bit of research, but then like you said, it has to be vetted as well.
Yeah.
I've used it to get some creative inspiration, but it's still, for what I do in design, it's still not quite there.
What about have you used the Photoshop versions? Like there's where you can put commands in and it will...
I thought it was pretty shit.
Right, okay.
But that's just where it's at now,
Yeah.
right? Like, the examples that you see, they're, best case examples. And there are some that people that have worked really well, but there are limitations.
Yeah.
Severe limitations so far.
And I think it's all to do with the user knowing the right commands and all that sort of stuff as well, like knowing how to ask it to give you what you want.
It's a matter of that, but then I think also knowing what it is that you want to get out of it. Like you just type in something like, something janky that you're asking it just to kind of fix your problems. It's not going to know how to do that.
Yeah.
You got to know what you need it to do specifically, and then put those commands in. Like the more detailed you can be, then the better the result. Mm-hmm. But it's still a matter of then you having more control over it than letting AI take free reign.
Getting back to your podcast, what episode are you up to now?
19 drops, so early days still.
Okay, well, early, but you do a good job of you edit them, which I don't do much. So you edit them, and you obviously put a lot of effort into them. Having the deadlines, is that like I know that you've gone to one a week,
Yeah,
and having that deadline, has that helped you, or
Yeah.
has it made it harder?
both.
Okay.
Both,
It's
man.
challenging.
It's challenging, man. Like I did the one a week because you stepped up and you did that. I'm like, fuck this guy. So I'm like, all right, cool. All right, one a week is possible. Now you're doing two a week. I'm not ready for two a
It's
week.
just because I got a backlog, but
Yeah, I'm not ready for that. But one a week is good. It's kind of forced growth where there was a couple. Okay, so a few reasons, right? Like it's giving me a deadline and saying that by this date, this episode's going up. Love it or hate it.
Yeah.
If it's not perfect, that's fine because it's not going to be anyway. Just learn along the way, and then the processing of trying to edit and get it to the point where I'm happy with and creating the content. It's just helped me tighten everything up.
Yep.
And I don't know about you, man, but like because I just didn't really think too hard about what I was doing from the start, and things kind of just build up, right? So I thought, I've got to start a podcast. All right, what do I need? All right, a couple of mics. All right, cool. Then I need to create some content for socials. All right, I'll grab some cameras. Okay, now I need some lights.
It adds up quickly.
It adds up, right? So it's not even just the cost, but it's the processes and the steps. Yeah. And then once you have all that, like shit, you learn quick, right? Yeah. You learn what you're capable of doing in a short amount of time. And then, like when I started off, it was just get the episode done when you get the episode done. Like a friend of mine who he had a podcast, is now doing another one. He gave some good advice that no one gives a shit about your deadlines. Only you give a shit about the deadlines. So don't be too hard on yourself.
Yep.
But then I kind of went the other way, and I kind of like just took it a bit easy, and then I just gave myself too much time to get things done. And momentum's a big thing when it comes.
Consistency's key, I think.
Yeah.
I think to anything, Like even if you talk about a pub, you want to go to the pub, you want it to be open all the time. If you start closing one day here or there, people stop going. They don't know when you're open.
Yeah.
So consistency, just doing that, whether it means anything to you, I think will eventually help people understand that you've always got content coming out.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not quite at the point where like one a week I'm happy with at the moment. It would be good to be able to step up, but just capacity.
Yeah. But I think one a week's fine. Like that's consistent enough.
Yeah.
The only reason why I'm doing more than that is because I've got so many up my sleeve. I'm like, I don't want to be talking to you and put it out in August,
Yeah.
which is where we would be. You know what I mean? So that's the only reason why I'm doing more than one a week personally.
Yeah, just so you can get it out. But then, like you said, man, like then people will see that you're showing up more, and they start resonating with the content. And then if they're filling their bucket, then they're gonna want to see more of it as well, and that just accelerates. But yeah, like it's challenging, but like it's not that I was thrown into this situation. Now it was
It's a challenge you put forward yourself.
yeah, put forward myself, and it just kind of came over a bit of time. You start off with these set of challenges, and then it kind of evolves, and those challenges grow, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. But then you're just better equipped to deal with them.
And every episode you do, you learn a little bit of something. You streamline the process. Obviously, there's challenges that come along the way, but it becomes easier, like anything.
Yeah, and like every episode, there's challenges, man. Like it's shit that you didn't think was coming up, and it came up, and like, oh god, I don't know. Have you had any failed recordings? Have you had that?
Yeah, I had one with Clint, who's a mate, so that made it easy. Where I had this whole setup, and see that little thing there?
Yeah.
That is a $13 line. Fucking, I don't even know what it does, but it cost me $13. Basically, there was too much power running through the podcaster thing, and it was making a hiss, and we had a whole episode with that. But other than that, I've been pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. I've had cameras fail. I've had mics not recording, and all little shitty problems like that could have been resolved just with like a little solution like that.
Yeah, but was that when you didn't have the permanent space, so you couldn't leave things where they were? Because I think having the studio alleviates all that.
Oh yeah, there is for sure. But then when you have like your the mic set up and it's plugged into something that's running on batteries, when you had the option of plug it into the wall,
batteries is a bad idea, man.
Bad idea.
Yeah, batteries are a bad idea. Like I try and have that, man. I try and have everything good to go that I can just switch everything on, make sure it looks good. And that's the key. If I had to pull all this out and drive somewhere and pack it all out again, I'd always fuck it up.
Yeah. No. Having a more permanent setup certainly helps, and just get in there and just flick the switches on, and it's more or less good to go until you forget to flick a switch.
It's another thing that I'll say. With having the visuals here that I've got, I can see when something's wrong. Like levels,
right.
I can see that the level, and that's something that you'll learn. But you just if something goes wrong there, I'll be like, I can fix it. So having the visuals,
just get yourself a producer. Get someone else to worry about it.
That would be amazing, man. But I can't afford that at this point in time. But that would be the dream.
Not yet. Like this is how it is, man. Like when you're starting off in this position and you're learning so much till you get to the point where, like the growth is happening just with you, right? Like you personally are learning a lot, and then you're feeding that back into the podcast. The podcast community is growing, and everything is kind of it's just moving along until it gets to a certain point. Like, shit, you know what? Like we're going to have to level up here, and you've leveled up already, but then, you level up again by bringing people on to take away some of the burdens that you don't need to worry about.
Yeah, man, I know. Like I put out a lot of content. The viewers aren't there where I want it to be, and I guess that's probably something that a lot of people starting out feel. Maybe like yourself, you put out a great episode, you're really proud of it. Doesn't get these sort of eyeballs on it that you want to. You just got to learn how to roll with that and keep moving on.
Yep. Yeah, for sure, man. I don't know if there's been an episode that I've guessed right. Like there are times when I'm like, this one's gonna knock it out of the park. And there are times when I'm like, oh, this one's probably not going to get enough eyes on it. And I've been wrong more times than right.
Yeah.
So, and then that's another thing with the weekly drop, right? It's just like, okay, cool, next one, right?
Yeah.
And, I don't sweat on the numbers, man. Like, I know what I got out of doing that episode. I know that there was a lot of value in speaking to that guest. They got a lot out of it as well, that they got to share their story or share a bit of wisdom. And honestly, man, it's just, I do this right now for me. If I appreciate what I got out of it, then then so be it. That's all I need.
The thing is, though, with both our shows, we're making content that isn't necessarily for a specific time. So people can appreciate that down the track.
Yeah.
And what I've found with mine, even if I have an episode that might only get 500 views, I'm like, oh, that's not huge, but the numbers will still tick up.
Yeah.
So, like, people are seeing that episode and going back and watching old ones.
Yeah.
So that is another thing that kind of is a positive. There's a lot of content on Instagram, on YouTube, where it's only relative for now, where we're making stuff that's going to be relative in the future as well.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about YouTube is, that's the different approach, that versus a regular podcast, which is audio only, is that YouTube is better at pushing your content out. It's a search engine, right? So when people are actively looking for something, and if you have evergreen content out there, then
That's the word, evergreen content.
yeah, so it'll push it up to the top if it's right for that audience, and it's better at finding who your audience is as well. Like it's you gotta punch out the episode. You got to get the runs on the board, and the more you do, the better it'll start being at identifying your little pocket. And yours is good, man. I think like you've been pretty sharp with the market or your little niche that you've carved out. Like I don't think that there's many that would even come close to the space that you're working in.
But I'm not getting huge numbers though, man. I'm just doing it consistently. That's it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not like I'm getting. It's not doing numbers at all. But it is what I am doing is building an Instagram community, building a bunch of people that interact and people that are small yet engaging audience.
And they're engaging, man. I think that's the thing. Like if you're building your own little pocket, your community of people that are genuinely invested in it, and like you're dealing with real people as well, like legit creatives, legit musicians and artists and they're all connected. They all have their own little community going, their own little pockets, their own their crew. And everyone is talking within those circles, and they want to see their people do well.
Correct.
They want to support that.
Most of the time. Not all the time.
Okay, yeah.
Depending.
Yeah.
But we're both lucky in the capacity when it comes to building a brand is that we have the opportunity to collaborate with people each week. And that's something that we take for granted doing this because a lot of other people that are trying to build something and build an online community, they don't always have that person that they can collaborate with that then boosts the brand up. So we are both lucky in that capacity.
Yeah, and that's the thing with with the niches, I guess, that with the space that we play in, is that it is highly collaborative. Even let's say like with art shows, group art shows, that it relies on a bunch of artists to then pump up that one show, and then within that community, let's say call it a dozen artists that are now rallying around each other, and then they'll splinter off, and then they'll do other art shows, and then now you're just starting to build up that community, and it's sort of like that. So like it's similar what we're doing similar to being like an art gallery, right? Like we're inviting people on, showcasing their work, let them talk their shit, and then putting it out there, trying to capture a wider audience for them as well.
Yeah. I worry a little bit about how Instagram has the whole creative scene pretty much backed into a corner. Like if Instagram would shut down tomorrow, how would people get eyes on their artwork? How would people get eyes on their podcast? How would people sell their merchandise? How would that happen? That's a bit of a concern, don't you reckon?
Yep. Yeah.
Like that's how we reach out. That's how we talk and communicate.
Yeah.
That's how a lot of people do.
Yeah, I heard this. Where did I? No, I read this one line. It's like, don't build your house on rented soil or something like that. And it just goes to show that there are a lot of people that have built a business on the backbone of another business that at any point can just pull the rug from under you, right? There's other podcasts or other platforms similar to what we're doing where they're actively trying to build a mailing list. At least that way you have direct contact and direct engagement with your audience that you can they're only going to be an email away. And sure, you're kind of relying on Google, but Google's not going anywhere. And, at least, you know what you're getting yourself into, where Instagram is just constantly changing up the rules and how to play the game, that you just got to be like, look, you're a passenger in the way that they do things.
For sure. Look, I'm not a fan of TikTok, but it seems to be that they haven't really fucked with it. It keeps being consistent. With Instagram, they keep changing it. Everything, they want to push. They're definitely pushing live now, and I try and do it.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to do.
But you still get people in, though. Like, people will still jump in.
20 people might come in a couple of minutes, which is like, it's not a huge, section of your audience, but I guess whatever. The idea with live is to stay live for a long period of time, and then people will come in, look for 2 minutes, and then get out again. I think that's the goal.
Would you do any of these live?
Yeah, potentially. What I would like to do is do interstate guests live on Instagram. That would be the way to do it, because you could set up a camera here and people could watch it. I don't know.
Ironic, doing a 3,000 podcast with interstate guests.
Yes, well, that's the thing, man. I want to grow. Look, 3,000 is what it's all about, and it's rooted in Melbourne, but I want it to grow beyond that. But we can always come back to Melbourne. You know what I mean? There's interesting people all over the country, all over the world.
Yeah.
If you lock yourself in too much, it needed something to focus on, and that's what it sort of was.
Yeah.
I want it to be bigger than that, personally.
Yeah, you'll get there, man. Like, you start off... I mean, you've already had some guests that, even though they've been live, but they weren't originally from Melbourne.
Yeah, heaps. Heaps, man. A lot.
And they were just visiting, they were touring around
People,
around the way.
and that's it. But if you do... The idea about doing 2 a week is that you could have one person that may be from another country down the track, and then you've got someone who's lived in Melbourne their whole life. So if people get pissed off on Tuesday, well, then Thursday, here's your Melbourne guest,
No, I don't know whether or not, you necessarily even need to have people from one geographic location,
Yeah. This is the thing. Every dickhead like you and I has a podcast these days, so you need a hook. You need something to ground it. And mine was the Melbourne thing,
Yeah, man, you're right. I think it is hard to try to find your own little pocket, but what you're doing is that you start off with that little niche, and then you can start building from there, and eventually that 3,000 is just 3,000 podcasts. You own it, and doesn't even necessarily mean Melbourne anymore. It's just 3,000 podcasts.
Man, I've had people that have come on the show, actual guests, and then they message me a week later, 3,000 is Melbourne. I'm like, yeah, they just didn't.
The hook turn thing given away.
Yeah, the hook, man. I've moved away from the hook turn. I don't think I'm going to use that moving forward.
Yeah, okay.
Do you like that from a branding point of view?
I mean, only because I got it.
You did get it. Some people don't get it.
Yeah. I got it, and I thought, that's clever. But if you're going to be moving away from necessarily keeping it Melbourne, and 3,000, just own it, right? It doesn't have to mean Melbourne either.
But it needs everything needs an angle or something an anchor to ground it. I feel like, and that's what mine was.
Yeah, cool.
Anyway, enough about me, man. Let's get back to you. How we've touched on the rollouts and deadlines. Where is your podcast heading? And I know this is hard.
Yeah.
To think, but where is it going? What direction is it going? Where's it going to be in 12 months' time?
12 months. It's going to be the same sort of conversations. I just want to get better at it. I want to get better at trying to identify what I want to speak with the guests about. I tried the whole winging it approach, and it wasn't necessarily working. I mean, it works for me, but I kind of like to have the conversation based around something rather than just talking shit, and then all of a sudden when I'm trying to edit, because I edit mine only because I want to make sure that there's a lot of substance in the conversations. So I think it's just a matter of then trying to find more of a spread of conversations as well. I want to identify what creativity means from a physiological point of view, wanting to speak with actual scientists, like neuroscientists, psychologists, and try to see what does it mean to be creative? How does it affect us?
It's a left brain, right brain sort of thing?
Kind of, but I wanted just to see what's the chemistry that's going on, and then how does that affect us on a physical level, and then how does that have knock-on effects with the rest of our lives, and how creativity then permeates our day-to-day. So it's just those type of conversations, really just trying to understand and just asking more questions about it. I want to see where it goes. The podcast, I want it to hang around for a good while, right?
And you're committing to one episode a week? are you going to do it in series, or are you just going to?
No,
do it,
I'm just going to keep going. Yeah, keep going until I just can't anymore. I think I don't even want to think about it. Like it's just one episode at a time, right?
Yeah.
So 19 this week, 20 next week, and just keep on rolling. And you would have seen on your end that there's the momentum picks up quick,
Totally, yeah.
right? Like more people are tuning in. You're reaching the right people, and that's what I've been finding as well. That it's resonating with the right people.
Quality over quantity.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just keep it going. Like I've set my marks. Like don't even question yourself. Don't even try to think too hard about what you're doing until you get to episode 50. Just keep on banging them out. Get to episode 50 and then give yourself a chance just to reflect and then figure out where it's at. And then if things need to change, then we'll go from there. But you just hold your breath and keep going until episode 50.
For sure. And have you got a monetization plan? Because this is something that I've struggled with, and a lot of people. And I feel like people are like, oh man, you could make a little bit of money here and there. But I'm like, a little bit of money is no good. You know what I mean? Like I'd rather make no money than a little bit and just not compromise the quality of what you want.
Yeah. Kind of a plan roundabouts, but it's not directly to do with the podcast. It's trying to see what future history is about and how it's going to evolve. The podcast was there to create content it's a quick way, not a quick way, it's an effective way, an efficient way of communicating what the values are of what future history is. The podcast is just one avenue. It's the one that is able to get my face out there. It's the one where I'm able to ask questions directly with people that I want to engage with. And then from there, it's a matter of then seeing what else is future history going to be about. Where else can I take it? And a lot of it is just learning around the way. And to what I was saying about, that 22-year-old with the carrot, dangling, I just thought that just start a podcast, right? And then let's just see what comes of it. And then speaking with guests along the way, that's when I'm starting getting ideas for things, directions that it can go, right? Like one episode I was speaking with this visual artist, and he's an experiential artist. So he creates visuals to complement music. So just live DJ sets or musicians, right? Live music, where he's creating the visuals to help complement and enhance that musical experience. So then I started looking into, okay, experiential art is a good way to it's something new and something novel, right? Like what is art? Art's something that we can experience, something that we feel. So it's about layering all the different, all the senses. How do you engage all the senses? Is that something that an area that future history can move into? And that's something that I want to explore, whether it be exhibitions or just live experiences, and then curate these type of events.
For sure. And that's something that you probably never thought of when you started.
No, I didn't. Yeah. So it's just resigning to the journey and just going, one episode at a time, and you learn something new, and then, just fires off something else in your brain, like, hey, shit, there's something there.
Yeah, and you might find that the audience chooses you. You might have a certain way that you do something in a sort of field, and then people just go, this is the direction it goes.
Yeah.
It's an entity in itself,
Exactly. And that's just how yours has kind of turned out as well.
Yeah, to an extent, for sure. But I think that sometimes something will just resonate with people and they go, this is the way it's going. And you kind of just jump on for the ride.
For sure, man. Like you're stepping into the unknown in most cases. Like, I mean, that's what we're doing day to day, right? Like even if you think you know what your day's going to look like, you got no idea, right? So you're just stepping in the unknown and you're kind of testing the waters and you're seeing what comes out of it. And then before you know, it's like, oh shit, I learnt something valuable right there. Let's bank that. Or then, you fuck up along the way. It's like, let's not worry about that. That's not the way to go. Moving this way. Mm-hmm. And then you're just kind of learning as you go on, as you're going, and you're growing as you're going. And then you're like, there's something here. Let's explore this avenue.
For sure. Where do you think, like, media and the way that people are consuming it are going? Like I said, I think live on Instagram is a thing. Live on YouTube will probably be a thing. Obviously, television is all but dead.
Yeah.
Where do you think it's going? Where do you reckon it's heading?
This ties back into the conversation with AI, and I think that we will, because of the way things are going with AI and with media, and just not really knowing what's authentic or what's real, is that we're going to be hungrier than ever for human connection and authenticity. So, to what you're saying about Instagram Live, that's something that's that they're pushing. I think that's also come off the back that we want to have connections with people, right? So, with the media consumption, that's kind of feeding one beast, but I don't think that that's necessarily helping us in any way. Like TikTok, I don't think that's how we necessarily want to consume media. I think it's just an addiction.
TikTok is horrible, man. Like I used it for a while, and I feel like it makes me stupider.
Yeah.
Like it feeds you shit that you don't want to see, and then if you kind of almost look at it for too long, it just sends you down a rabbit hole of that same stuff.
Yeah.
And it makes it's it's bad.
It's just like eating Macca's every day. I mean, like, sure, you think it's a great idea. It's like, oh, fuck, I would love that. But then as soon as you start doing it, yeah, eventually you're like, oh, man, I feel like shit.
But the never-ending scrolling that's the real, like, you can lose so much time down that rabbit hole. And I think so many people now are having these social media detoxes and all that sort of stuff, which is great. But that shows you how much it fucking consumes our lives when people need to detox off an app.
Yeah. And it didn't, I mean, it took a while to get there, but that's the way that it was always going to go, right? Like, it was always going to be us having the doom scrolling, right? Like just really short snippets of just to get the endorphins firing and just get the serotonin going, just the happy drugs, the happy brain drugs. And you just get addicted to that. So it's not necessarily anything that is providing any value. It's just making us feel good in that moment.
Yeah, I think we're really in dire need of a new social media platform. And I know there's probably a lot out there, but I feel like Instagram's got every creative, like, by the balls. TikTok just makes you stupider. Facebook is all but dead. Like, I think, will be a mass exodus from Facebook soon. There is a market for something else to come out.
Well, have you seen the Kara? The one that's coming around? I think there's a new one that the creatives are jumping on.
Okay.
I don't know how that's going to go. I don't know much about it. Okay. I just signed up for it.
Be interested to check it out, yeah.
Have a look.
I haven't... What's it called?
Kara, Cara.
Okay.
Only because I just saw a bunch of artists started sharing their stuff on it. But I don't think we need another social media, man. I kind of feel that it was always going to work out this way. Like, every iteration of it has always been wanting to then get to the point where we're at now. It's like just consuming content in a brain dead way and just scrolling. Like, if you ask any one of these guys that's not TikTok, if they had come up with that, would they be happy with it? Of course, I would. They'd love it. Yeah, I get wet over it. This is the boss level that we're at right now.
Yeah, it's like the fact that Google, with all its resources, tried to launch social media and just couldn't make it happen. That says how much of a stranglehold Meta has, or Facebook was then.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook. I mean, but they bought Instagram, so they just had the money, the resources.
But before they sold Instagram had no way of monetization at all.
Yeah.
Right. So they just backed themselves. Eventually, they're going to sell it. So obviously, you've got to have enough money and nous behind you to do that.
Yeah.
But then, as soon as Facebook buys it, there's a lot of ads. There's a lot of ads on there now, man, and it was different back then before they bought it.
Yeah, a lot of ads, and I wonder like how much of that plays into the feed as well. Like, how do you reach an audience without paying to play?
Do you ever sponsor or boost anything? I never have.
No, because I'm scared that as soon as like you dip your toes in it, then they know that they got you by the balls.
I used to think that as well. And I had this chat with someone the other day, and they said that they tried. They only put like $60 into something, which is nothing in the scheme of things. And they said that didn't really change their reach.
Okay.
But I don't know. That's like a can of worms I don't really want to open.
Yeah, same. I'm not. Look, growth is nice. All those metrics, those numbers, they I guess they're nice, but you can't play the game that way. I think that once you start trying to find external validation for what you're doing, and that's when it becomes a slippery slope.
Yeah, but at what point is it necessary evil, though? Do you know what I mean? Like, we spend so much time on Instagram trying to build these things. Is it worth putting the $50 in a week? Do you know what I mean? This is something that I want someone else to do the research for me, because I feel like once you can't go back,
Yeah, exactly. And it could be a matter of like, hey, $50 is enough. Maybe next time I'm going to try 100.
Yeah.
And then 100 works. Like, oh shit, maybe I got to do it again and then again.
But if you're seeing the numbers on the other side, which is then monetizing from something else, maybe it's worth it.
If you're running a business that you're on that platform to make money, and that's how you're reaching your customers, then maybe that's the way that it needs to go. But we're not here for customers.
That's true.
Yeah.
I know people that have successful clothing brands, they put a lot of money into meta advertising because it just keeps popping up in their target market's feed. They know people, but they're then clicking, and that's turning into dollars back. So it's a loss leader that makes sense.
Yeah, it's an investment. But like we're invested enough, man. It's like
That's it.
not even just money, but time and resources. And
Well,
oh
that's
my
it.
God.
How do you go with the work-life passion project balance?
It's hard. It's hard, and that's one of the things that I speak with other artists is that it's hard to delineate what is work and what's life, right? It's not like that you can clock on and clock off. Like you're constantly absorbing, always working, and that's not a bad thing if you don't. I mean, you got to have healthy boundaries, right? Like when I'm at home with the kids and I try to keep that's off time. Like weekends now, I'm able to keep that as off time. Where once upon a time it was more like shit. I've got to finish this edit.
That is hard though as well. Like when you're asking people to donate their time to come and talk to you, like I say that as well. I'm like, I shoot Tuesday to Thursday. People are like, I work a real job. I've got to come on the weekend. But I tell my partner the same thing. On the weekends, I won't shoot.
Yeah.
I don't stick to that.
Oh, really? Okay.
I try my best. I try my best, but it is hard because you got to work with other people when they're donating their time.
Yeah.
When they're giving you their time, you can't really be specific and like, all right, well, you've got to come on this day. You know.
So far, I guess I've been lucky enough that the artists that most of them don't. Well, I don't want to say they don't work real jobs. They don't work 9 to 5 jobs. They don't work 9 to 5. They're not restricted in that way. But yeah, I think that's really part of that challenge, that work life, that balance, and that's something that I speak with them about. Is how does their work being their creativity, how does that feed back into their life, right? And like, you make mistakes in life and then you can feed that back into your work. Musicians, for example, right? They pour their heart out into their music.
Makes better music,
yeah? So how does that affect your creativity, and then how does your creativity then feed back into your life? And what's that relationship like? And for most of them, there's no off switch. And I don't think that that's necessarily a problem because you always want to be absorbing, you always want to be learning and just being mindful and just being present as well, and just taking in everything wherever you are.
How have you gone about shooting episodes and then chopping bits? Because you edit, because I don't edit. Chopping bits out. Have people come back and gone, "Oh man, I actually liked that bit that you chopped out"? Has that been an issue?
I haven't had that.
No?
I haven't had that bit. I don't cut out, when I say edit, I don't cut out much. It'll be
Shuffle it.
It would just be, sometimes it'll be shuffling, and then a lot of it would just be, I would ask, so it depends on the approach, right? Like lately, because it's just been me just like talking like this, right? Just riffing. And it'll be times where I'm like, oh, I'll just be asking some nonsensical question, and then they'll be like, I have no idea. I'm like, all right, that's got to go. Would just be shit like that.
Yep.
But then sometimes, like, for example, there was one episode when I was speaking with James Rush, and there was one really important bit that I wanted to touch on, and the conversation was just flowing, and I forgot all about that. And then when we wrapped up, I was like, oh, dude, there was something that I need to ask you about.
Yep.
So let's talk about it. And then in the back of my mind, I'm already thinking, okay, where can this slot in? It was going to be tricky because the conversation just flowed. So that's kind of how I edit. But normally it's just a matter of then, like as you're switching the cameras live, I'll be doing that in post.
Yeah, okay. And then, so how much time would you say each episode takes with the preparation, the organisation, the shoot? Because I know you catch up with most guests before you even have them on.
All but one.
Which is,
Yeah.
that's time consuming in itself.
That is, man. But I love that. That was the whole point of the podcast, right?
Yep.
It's just to catch up and getting to meet these people and having real conversations. So when I catch up with them, it's usually just over coffee. You know, we'll just for an hour, maybe a couple of hours max, where we'll just be shooting the shit, just talking, just trying to build that rapport, break the ice. So by the time we get into the podcast, into the studio, we're not going in cold. They're not going to be too nervous around me. Like it's a bit warmer.
Yep.
But it was all but one. I think it was with Chico. I actually just liked his work, and we bumped into each other around the way through exhibition openings and whatnot. I wanted to get him on, and we just couldn't line up a catch up. So I thought, and I wanted to record on that side of Christmas. So I got him on, and we just started talking. I had no idea of the conversation we were going to have, and he was just so open and so honest with what he was saying that I was blown away by his stories that he gave. Like he, had a severe life-changing moment, surgery,
Yep.
that just shifted his whole perspective. And then from there, it was just one of the most fulfilling conversations
Awesome.
I've had.
So did you think maybe the catch up is not always necessary?
No, it's not. That's the thing, man. Like, it's not always necessary. And I don't know what to do about it because I like catching up with people.
Well, you could do the post chat catch up where you have a coffee and you talk about it. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But how much time do you say goes
How much
into
time? Yeah.
each episode?
That was the
because
question.
because you do you do it a lot more thoroughly than I do. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, maybe it is. I don't know. Like, I mean, you still create a lot of content. It's just, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be more time on it or more productive time because it's still a lot of learning as I go, but it's definitely getting quicker. I probably need all up 2 or 3 days back to, end on end of just catching up and then recording, then editing, and then creating the content and doing all the social media bullshit.
So there's a lot though.
It's a lot.
And how many reels do you think per episode is good? Because I used to do 2 and then I sort of went to 1 and I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like that's a tough one as well. Like you don't want to pull apart all the best bits of your chat because you want people to actually dive in and watch the episode.
Yeah, I mean, I try to go for 3.
That's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, 3. I mean, look, that's the benefit of editing, right? So I'm in there and I'm looking at all the little what is important, right? And I actually get a lot out of that editing process. When you're in a conversation, we're just talking, and what I found is that in the edit is when I can start really like honing in on some of the substance. So I keep a journal with me as I'm editing as well. I'm taking notes,
Yep.
and I've figured that there's value in not just the conversation, but there's value in the process of editing. I'm just trying to extract as much value as I can throughout the whole process. So I'm taking notes on every episode, whether it's something that they said or how I engaged in that episode, or just like, mate, like maybe we got to reschedule the time, a different time to give myself, a bit more buffer, whatever it may be, right? Just taking lessons as I go along the way.
Yeah, it's all about personal growth.
Yeah,
It's the journey.
It's the journey, man, and that's underestimated. It's too underestimated. That's kind of why there's no goal with this, man. It's just it ends up going where it ends up going.
In most other things in your life, are you more calculated? But this is you're just letting it go.
Fuck, the opposite, man. And this is kind of, I could go on about this, but this is just how it got to this point where, like, I've just moved along my career in design and without having any goal or any focus, which it's been to the detriment, right? Like, I just didn't take control over where things went. I took jobs they were good jobs. They weren't fit for me. They weren't right for me anyway.
But when you've got a family, you've got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, maybe so. But I think that there's still, I could have given a career more consideration, and then I didn't think about where it would eventually end up. Like if as a designer, I guess ultimately one of the pinnacles that you can aim for is as a creative director. But then you didn't really think too hard with what that meant. Once you become a creative director, it's like a different set of responsibilities that I didn't necessarily want. So I kind of just moved along the way and was shitty that I wasn't achieving what I wanted to achieve, but I didn't know what I wanted to achieve. So
Yeah, which is hard.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So then I thought, I want to just try something new, change course, change direction, and take a little bit more agency and a little bit more control over what it is that I do, while still relinquishing that control and just saying that it is what it is. It just ends up being what it ends up, and I'll learn and move with that.
For sure, because if you have a finite idea of what you want some creative process to be, then you're almost pigeonholing yourself to where it could go.
Man, like speaking with these other designer friends, I think one in particular that was a bit frustrated with himself with the direction that with the pivot that he had to take in his career. And I was like, look at any creative project that you've done. Let's break it down to when you've given a brief from a client and then straight away you're getting the ideas going. But how has the outcome looked? The outcome is never how you saw it from day one, right? Like that day one is just the carrot. You have that idea, then you go down that rabbit hole and it ends up being something else. So then it's just like resigning to that, resigning to the fact that things are going to change. Like they will never be how you thought it was going to be from the start, and just to not have too much of a stranglehold
For sure. Yeah. That stifles the creativity if you have a fucking exact idea of what you're going to do.
Yeah, yeah. It's, I mean, like, it would just be, let's say, for example, with your podcast, right? Like, you know, you have a bit of an idea, but don't hold that idea too tight, and then just let the process kind of take you along that journey.
For sure. I think that's really important to let it, to roll with it, you know? I'm going to hit you with an odd one here. There's a genie, and the genie said, man, I'll get any guest on the show for you that you want. Who would you be getting on your show?
I had someone ask me that.
Did they? I thought that was a good question.
It was a good question. It was a good question, but like, thankfully, I'm not entirely put on the spot. And this may change as well over like before I started recording. Yeah, that question was asked, and I thought, you know, it would be great. Christopher Nolan was at the top of my list. I love movies. I don't get to watch enough of them, but I just like the way that guy thinks and how he doesn't really give a shit about what other people think about his movies either. He just does his thing, and just how he layers in all the different components, and he does it his way, and it's complex, but he manages to get it across the line.
Has it changed though?
Oh, I haven't given it much thought since then. He's still up there. He's still up there. But I want to get a varied mix of different creatives. I think you also get to the point where like they're at that level. The people at the top of the game are crazy, right? The lunatics, the geniuses, and that kind of comes with the territory. So then it's just a matter of then who do I think I could learn from who's not completely lost their marbles.
Yeah, that's great, man. I love the way that you attack it in a who could I learn from the most, not which one would be the most received from an audience or which one would be great for the progression of the show. You're staying authentic to think who could I learn from the most, which is an awesome answer.
Yeah, sweet. I didn't even have to give that one much thought. No, but that's just what it is, man.
But the whole way you're doing this, the whole thing is just about growing personally, and it's the show is a byproduct, which is you can't question your motives with that. It's fucking awesome.
Man, I've been too long, like my whole teenage years and 20s, it was arrogant. I was arrogant, pretty cocky about basically how I just carried myself through my work, through my career. And like I was saying, I was just relying on just winning and just that sounds egotistical, but it was that. It was more like, you know, I got this, right? Like I just on skill alone, I'll get through. And you learn very quickly that doesn't get you far enough, right? Like you start to resent things quickly when things don't go your way, and you realize that the people that were more humble and resigned to the process and were harder workers than you were, they're the ones that are going to come up on top.
For sure. And they're probably the people that are more likely to learn from their colleagues and people around them, their contemporaries. Yeah,
exactly. So that's where I'm at now, man. It's just, that growth process of realizing that it's not enough just to be good at something. You just got to work towards it, and you got to be humble, and you got to then see that there's something that you can learn from everyone.
For sure. Natural ability, I think, only gets people so far of the way. You know what I mean? Like let's use basketball for an example. There's people that are amazing natural talents, but the people that put in all the hard work that maybe didn't have the best skills are the ones that will eventually be the best players.
Yeah. And man, you look at like in any field, any industry, the people up the top, not necessarily saying that they're going to be the happiest or the most fulfilled, but if you're looking in just like at that metric of success, the common denominator is just hard work, right? Yeah. So at the very least, you've got to be willing to give that, and then along the way, try to find what it is that fulfills you and mix that and bring that into the fold as well.
Yeah. how have you enjoyed being on the other side of the microphone?
This is nice, man.
It's chill.
This is nice. Like, you don't have to think so much. You can just talk. On your end, it's a lot. Like, I'm processing when I'm speaking with.
Yeah.
Yes, when I'm doing mine, I'm processing and thinking, like trying to engage in that conversation, but at the same time, having to think what to say next.
Yeah, but I think that when you get to a natural conversation, it flows okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, we attack it in different ways. But I think, yeah, you've been really good on the other side of the mic, man.
Yeah, thanks, man.
What have you got in store for future history coming up? I feel like we're almost tipping on to an hour and a half, and I know that that's where most of your podcasts kind of are at. So I feel like that's kind of the natural conclusion, man.
Yeah.
What's coming up?
What's coming up is it'll just be more podcasts, more episoding. I think, like I said, I'm going to give till 50. And 50, that's when I'm going to really have a good hard look with where things are at. There are different things that I want to explore. So, running those exhibitions and those experiences, it's when I get to that stage, that's when I want to start honing in and trying to figure out what that looks like. That's been the benefit of meeting with different artists and creatives along the way, that, you get to understand how there's overlap in what they do. So how do I then bring in a musician or a music producer with a visual artist? And, I've even spoken with someone that he works in perfumery, so in scent. So how do I mix those senses? And then a chef, something culinary, all the 5 senses. Full experience. So it's trying to understand that, and I think that'll be the next evolution. That probably won't come around for another.
That's a lot, man.
Yeah. It's. I mean, that's where it's at. That's the ambition. I think that there is room for that, and as you're speaking with different people and about the whole, even with collaboration, it's you're able to create something new with different disciplines. And I think that's the power of the collaboration. You're able to, what is it? It's the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? So I've always trying to see different ways of bringing in multiple parts and create one whole thing that is unique and has its own value to it.
Yeah.
That'll be where this evolves to, I feel. But we'll see what happens in the next 12 months.
Yeah, well, if you're going to do one a week, 30 weeks, you'll be at 50, and then we'll see where you're at, man.
Yeah.
I'd love you to come back on just after 50 if you'd be down to do that. We can catch up
man.
again.
Yeah. And we can then explore what's happened in the meantime then.
For sure. All right, Wayne, I appreciate you coming on, man. Thanks for being a guest, and thanks for being on the other side of the mic with us.
Hey, thanks, man.
Cheers.